Over to Dr. Sandeep.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ashish. Uh, this was a really great opportunity for every one of us to deliberate on different issues which are related to COVID. And today, as decided by the Executive Committee of AUSD, the third Indian Oration has been conferred to Dr. Puneet Chandna. Dr. Puneet Chandna is clinician, scientist, academician, and entrepreneur. He is MD and in internal medicine and PhD in biophysics. He is past faculty and collaborator at Tata Memorial Hospital, Mumbai since 2009 and experience in healthcare for over 2 decades now as clinician, scientist, and entrepreneur in healthcare. His continuous endeavors and passion to learn has been endorsed as certifications in precision medicine across multiple specialties of cardiology, oncology, diabetes, nutrition from Harvard Medical School and Ohio State University and University of Pennsylvania. He has outlived as council member and expert consult to many international clinical and research societies and has been author of over 32 clinical publications appearing in Government of India projects are few of his highly cited aggregates. He is member of the Skill Development Institute of Government of India and consultant in quality standards and testing. And he is working hard to pave futuristic healthcare through fusion of biomedicine, biotechnology to explain, mend, manage, and transform lives past and beyond technology, diagnostic, wellness, and training. So we found from Indian Oil Corporation a learned person for delivering the third Indian Oil oration. So I welcome Dr. Puneet Chandna, sir.
And can I
And
now request Dr. Sandeep to please confer the Indian Oil Oration Medal to Dr. Chanda?
thank
Over to Dr. Chanda, please.
Good afternoon. I hope I am audible because we had some problems with the earlier presentations, slightly that the people online were not able to hear. Am I audible at the back, sir? Okay, great, because my voice is a little bit harsh, but I like to make a good presentation. I'll try at least because afternoon presentations, as Dr. Jain said, can be a little bit lazy, pouring down, and there's not much to speak because most of the people, most of my learned colleagues here have already covered most of the points, so it makes it a little bit easy for me. And to begin with, uh, Mr. President, thank you very much for letting me have come here for delivering this oration. Senior members, AUSD, and my fellow guests. 151 is the number which is usually auspicious in Indian mythology. 151 is also a number that Indian Oil retains as the amongst the 500 fortune companies. So all that glitters is gold, and all that is, oil is also gold. There are few other things. It is very difficult in life to have, to be thorough in learning and exhaustive in investigation. While I was digging in, and I thought I'll have something for Indian Oil, and how does it an oil company connect of course, there is my colleague answered a few questions for me. Thank you very much on the Indian Oil. But there are other things which were notifiable, including the office bearers who are here from Indian Oil. I'll just read out a couple of them before we start and quickly try and get this oration onto the right platform. So when we talk about Indian Oil, I told you it is a 151 on the number at the Fortune 500 companies. Indian Oil's 1,470 kilometers cross-country pipelines, network facilities, work in the transportation of crude oil, and whatever we get is not only the oil. We are into the home gas as well. Indian Oil focuses on its employees' priority. That's what I learned also. Digging further, we have all refineries. Correct me if I'm wrong from the uh, groups here. All refineries are certified for occupational health and safety management systems, right? Indian Oil is the first PSU to launch the project Happiness and Well-being amongst all the PSUs we are talking about here today. A book on happiness and well-being has been published and regularly being revised. Corporate occupational health manual has been developed and is being periodically reviewed by the groups here, the doctors, and of course, we have one of the eminent ones is Dr. Sandeep Sharma with us here. We uh, have programs at Indian Oil. They have been running the managing stress and health at workplace guidelines of on health. On guidelines on the health, nutrition, and occupational health. So very wise to have a general secretary, the secretary, honorary secretary from this group here. So as I begin my oration here today, we'll talk about briefly what were the achievements we had in the last year and what would be the guidance we may have for the clinicians and the groups going forward in terms of the post COVID era. And we'll be talking about few vaccines here. I would like to begin with special gratitude we owe to our frontline workers. For me, what I understood in this pandemic was the most invaluable and the most invisible of all the workers were the workers who were frontline, who kept our facilities clean. They made the OPDs cleaner. They made the workspace. So I thank them first before I go on to the caregivers and the caretakers, all the way from police departments to pizza delivery boys and everyone who made our life easy while we were in the lockdowns. Allow me to proceed from there. And I would like to thank all of you here as well who came in and have been, having this congregation on convention in a way, in a spread out manner to avoid spreading of infections too. Early 2020, we saw the breaking news gathering more information about the deaths which started from Wuhan in China, went on to Italy, and then many other parts of the world. We had people having panic buying. You had empty shelves on the marketplaces. Media talked morning, evening, night. All were Corona mornings and the times of the day. Only thing that has changed post that is we have gone online. And sometimes nowadays, as we talk in Twitter days, 140 words are now sometimes talking about your competence and maybe or a television program, but it's not always the case. We have new words for the nouns and verbs of Zoom and the Teams now. We have gone online, and like we are having even the CMEs online, 45 to the DigiConnect series. Thanks to the team here and the organizers, I think it's in a record in itself. Never before, we might have also seen post the end of the World War II that we were limited of our freedom, and these were the democracies who actually justified it. Our governments felt restricting people, making them being inside and not mingling socially was justified. But the times did not stop there, and we had more problems that was surfacing. There were two strategies we were talking about, and I think my previous speakers have covered a lot of details on this. We had two strategies to curb the pandemic. One was the raise the line, which means, in fact, increase the number of healthcare facilities that could treat only the COVID. We had more and more hospitals coming up every day. We had centers converted into COVID hospitals. The other is an important one and a common one you might have heard about, which is flatten the curve. Flatten the curve means reduce the infections by transmission modes and keeping them at bay. And finally, I'm not talking about herd immunity here, but it is just that the infections are not spreading. But most of the clinicians throughout the world, they got both the strategies in mind, and they had the raise the line, and or they always call it as raise the bar as well. and flatten the curve, as both strategies going hand in hand. That is why we initially saw many hospitals coming up, COVID facilities, then we were lockdowns, and then reducing, going back and forth to contain the virus. Oops. History of pandemics, everyone has talked about early 1918s and so on. There are many deaths, all the way from Spanish flu to HIV, AIDS, and others. But the important message we carried from here were, how do we rank and what was the scare for the governments? 73% of world population unfortunately is under the score of 50. If you see on here, on this chart here on the right hand side, 50 is the score which has been given on the six parameters, which is prevention, detection, rapid response, healthcare systems, and compliance of the global health guidelines, and risk environment, which is friendly to spread viruses or contain them. Unfortunately, 73% of the world, we can say, was below half the mark. US, of course, the developed countries were about 50, 85, and so on. India, unfortunately, was at 46.5. But then the first speaker, I think the oration for the AUSD, I thank Dr. Jain for helping us out and remaining better on this one, that even at 46.5, we did better than the rest of the world. Government came forward. We had, bailout packages, and, we tried to help people in the last year, which is 80% of the Indians workforce, out of which one third are casual laborers. Then came up the apps and worldometers. Worldometers are places where you pick up data every day, every minute, right? People were sharing on WhatsApp, and from there on, we had also looked at apps like Arogya Setu. We went on to record many strains of the virus after mutations, which is it is essentially the mutations which are at the molecular level, at inside the cell at a nucleus level, or you can say DNA and RNA level. Though is an RNA virus, which is COVID, so we call it as an RNA mutation. This is a graph which shows all the mutations which has taken place, out of which B117 you hear about these days is the UK strain, which once surfaced, 60% infections were around that. Designs, doses, devices to DNA. We just sprung up and wanted to build everything. The first thing on the left you see is a ventilator. And then following that is a ventilator developed by India. So India has a ventilator, 3 companies. I thought it was important. We had the rapid antigen kits made by 4 companies now. The bottom, I was fortunate to be a part of the facility we set up in Hyderabad with the government for the synthetic DNA and the vaccine production. Following that, we have the kits which are now being made. We saw in the last year that a lot of protocols, algorithms, guidelines just poured in. We used antivirals, we used anti-parasitic medicines, we used monoclonal antibodies, we used plasma, convalescent plasma on patients, and all were in. There were guidelines which were given in green, red, and the yellow. We followed them all the way up to community health, wherein we started talking about, after a few months and weeks, something called as the herd immunity. But it takes typically a few weeks to, per se, at a molecular level, before we can talk about herd immunity. Miracles happen. Vaccines are called as miracles sometimes. Remdesivir, or new drugs that came in, emergency use, protocols. We thought they are blessings, but they may not remain. Unfortunately, they may kick in only after a few weeks or may not remain forever. Currently, the immunity we are talking about, with several strains on which the vaccines work, are probably going to last for 3 months. But then newer vaccines would be coming in. We'll have a look. From certain aspects, if we see global data, some revolutionary, or I would say, groups have pointed out that we might have already struck the herd immunity. For measles and few other diseases, we talk about, or even polio for that matter, we talk about 82 and 90% or plus. number of infections in a population, whereas we are talking about 75 to 80% in a COVID-19. So I believe that that might be there, but there is no proper and rightful means by which we can actually go down and say yes, it has come and we don't need a vaccine. Sites which were talking about, and the hashtags were running, and you can still trace them. Important thing was to learn about immunity. We talked about in the yesteryears immunity is, that immunity from external factors, internal factors, that is a layman language. Then we talk about the first level, second level, and third level when we went to the medical school. Now we were talking little bit more deeper, which is the immune system response as well, which is an innate response or an adaptive response. The immunity which is passive or an active. The passive, immunity can be in the IgG antibodies. That is where the fetus get is from the mother, and then we have through the breastfeeding mothers, and for the vaccines, right, which go all the way and are the mode of contention today by some people. The four types of vaccines we looked at: live attenuated, inactivated, subunit, and the toxoids. Below would be the names. I'm not going into details of that. You would already know about them. Why were so many vaccines? Trust me, there are about 150 or two, in between 150 and 200 candidates still around. There'll be more vaccines you'll see beyond just two or three, which you can count on the fingers. They were based on the viral vectors, viruses themselves, which were limited or deactivated to a certain extent. Nucleic acid vaccines, which are made by the synthetic DNA, the protein based vaccines, and some others, which will have different routes, which will be like oral routes, or, because we are talking today about, vaccines which are intramuscular. There'll be dermal vaccines. There might be, oral vaccines like we had for the polio. Why we had so many? Because only about 7 of every 100 will be considered good to go from the research to the clinical trials. When these 7 come in, it is only about 1 out of 5 is just successful before it can go through the human trials and get to the population here. So it was a difficult task. With the communities, the task goes all the way. There are different steps in the lab too. We understand it's not just about the first and the second and the third phase trial. There's a lot of things done in the lab before we can even find out a candidate. There's a combinatorial chemistry which can screen compounds between 100,000 compounds in a day. The last time I was in the lab in Hyderabad, they were screening 300,000 compounds over and over again to the exponential level of 5. That's the data doesn't come back. So now if I try and put it together, it becomes complicated. You can see, there are so many vaccines we are talking about, which are in the pipeline. The vaccines you hear about today are the vaccines which have been talked about in different dosage. The mRNA vaccines, which have 2 doses each, and then, which is the Moderna and the Pfizer. Then AstraZeneca is a viral vector one. So you take a piece of DNA and you put your virus inside, which is delimited, for it is deactivated per se. So viral vectors are nothing but synthetic compounds in which you can incorporate your vaccines and put it inside the human body. And the protein subunits are just about, could be oral as well. So efficacy is roughly maintained at about 90% and so on. Diseases, the storages are different. People have been talking about communities. And, we will now hear in future, there'll be vaccines which will be like 3-dose combos, which came up today. They have released. We go further. This was a little bit early when, in comparison between dollars to, or the foreign currencies to, the Indian rupees. But then now we are talking about 250 rupees a dose. COVID-2 app starts tomorrow, as also the president pointed out in the first VRs of the day. And we go forward, and there'll be 2 doses, and now we have a single dose vaccine also. We'll come and see that news also. Before they came in, we had controversies. These controversies brought us down. There were pictures, there were stories given out for vaccines. I would like to name one here, the Covaxin. It doesn't mean that Covaxin was something which is not working, though we have a provincial one on the Covishield. The Covaxin is just on the trial mode, which is an official US FDA approved mode of delivery of vaccines in emergency use authorizations. While we talk about this, I agree and I confess that I am part of the people who could have done the job better. There could have been a proper dissemination so that there was no resistance to the vaccine. More data could have come earlier and timely. I was talking about the Sputnik vaccine, which is a Russian vaccine, which didn't even go to the third phase trial. But then it was, launched and it is doing well. And the data we saw in the first half of the day, it was doing well. The Johnson and Johnson vaccine, I would say, would be another boon because we'll have only a single dose. Single dose, less money, and of course we all are not ONGC, and we'll give them, the free, oximeters. I mean, that was good. Every vaccine has a schedule we have been seeing for our, clinics right from day one, or when you graduated. So we have doses which is going yearly, or booster doses and so on. Similarly, we have, contraindications which are for different vaccines we have known all these years. COVID has fever, headache, and muscle aches. Muscle aches could be during the COVID as well, but then due to the vaccination also, it may not be all long haul syndromes. So at least 8 weeks of safety data were gathered initially before we went on to that. The companies talk about something different. They have comorbidities, but today they have released, because most of my slides might be, even if it is, every slide changes by the hour. Something which I'm presenting now may not hold good tomorrow. We had Covaxin, which came in, and we have the Covishield. There were blood thinners. There were, comorbidities like the hypertension, diabetes, and so on, which were, patients were selected out of that. But today, I think one of the companies, Covishield, talks about is that they're good to go with 60 years below with comorbidities. There were some apprehensions about the virus and its manufacturing, for the vaccines. But I see the third one as the replication into the genes. It hardly does. The mammoths drive countries like India, 1.3 billion population. That was a big problem and is going to be a big problem. As far as the numbers go, we are vaccinating about globally is about 60 lakh people. It's going to take a very, very long time before we actually vaccinate or inoculate people to about 70 or 80%. So, but then the country came up together. I am sure organizations like ours, they came together. There were 61,000 program managers, 3.7 lakhs vaccination team members, vaccinators, cold chains established across. So this is all ready. I'm not going into detail of each and everything, but then we are talking about, 9 transformating investments which the governments have to do and will be doing, to gain this story to come to a herd immunity stage, or before at least we can carry on doing our work. So navigating a nation ship is not easy, which is why we are talking. It's easy to judge people, but it's not easy to navigate a ship when you're talking about commercial growth. Everyone is talking about money, GST, numbers, GDP going down, minus. So all it will be our responsibility as well to be a part of every initiative. So when we are talking about the 9 transformating investments we have to make, would be community involvement, strategies to reach people more and more quickly, faster, I would say, planning the cycles as to how and where people get vaccinated, adequate supply has to be there. There have to be more vaccination capacity, or the vaccinators have to be developed. Infancy vaccination, currently we don't have one, but in future we may have it. And the community involvement. Eagerness, hesitancy, and crisis. There are people till yesterday or till today who wanted to have a vaccine, but they didn't have an opportunity because we were vaccinating the frontline workers, the healthcare workers. So those people also join the group tomorrow. The second dose, which is almost begun for a few people, will also be a part of the queue for the second dose. Hesitancy came in from less information, which we call as misinformation, or misconceptions that have to be clarified as we go forward. It is not only this time, it will come in the future also. The crisis centers, now earlier we had the treatment centers. So AEFI, which is the adverse effects, after vaccination or inoculation. So we would need more centers in case things do not go well. Challenges staring at us. As I told you, 130 countries still haven't received their first dose of vaccines. So we might be there. So maybe that is why Mumbai is, looking at isolating themselves separately, UK isolating them as country, and so on. So this may repeat or may go for further up to many countries to take up that challenges. Masks can be there for one more year easily, I would say. It could take up to 75% population may need 5 years at the current rate. So in case there are dropouts, there are people who are hesitant, that is more of a crisis. The entire thing may fail and we may not gain it. So imagine 5 years with the restrictions. I think I'm sure I will not survive that long time. Because though I thought maybe the worst part was being a physician and with a mask most of the time, I think the worst part is now when the mask is all the time, right? And then you know what's not happening. So currently, India stands as of February 21st. We have not even vaccinated 1% per 100. I think as we move forward, the closing, because I'm not going into detail of every specific thing we may have had a hand, but the frontier, guidance and importance would be in the near term, the COVID-19 vaccines would prevent more people from becoming infected and dying. The second order effects include controlled utilization of hospitals and healthcare resources because we have a lot of burden currently because we have to do the tertiary healthcare objectives to be met. In the midterm, if COVID-19 were to become an endemic, the presence of the vaccine will allow the broader population to be inoculated, like we did for the rubella and the mumps. And if the disease mutates or immunity is short lived, the additional development and the manufacturing capacity currently being established could be applied quickly to increase the vaccine capacity and create new vaccines for us and accelerate the response to the future pandemics. But looking at this, I would like to close this oration by stating that, vaccines have come as an insurance policy for us, both social and for economic stability first, before a growth can even spark off. So we look forward to please help us share and be a part of this initiative. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Puneet Chandna, sir. Thank you very much. And because after oration, we don't have any questions for the audience, so you have to bear with us. So thank you very much for
Thank
this
you very much.